Hi everybody, it's me out of this world burrito, and we're going over a few updates today regarding the Ewok Festival of Love, a major content update that dropped that buffs some professions, as well as some hotfix that came out right afterwards. Really fast though, let's cover with the Ewok Festival of Love starting once again. I'm not going to try and say this Ewokese, you can do it for yourself. The patch notes, like I said, we'll cover, but let's start out with a reminder that there is a starter guide on how to follow the event and participate. There's going to be a video going up on my channel as well on how to do all the things involving the event. However, let's look into the events going on this year with Ewok Festival of Love, which these are events hosted by the Legends staff. So these are in addition to the normal goings-ons of the event. The first one, of course, is the monthly Galactic Home Show, which will have a Ewok Festival of Love theme. The next event we have is a Night on the Town, which this will be a social event where players are going to be meeting on Bespin to have a party, and that party is going to move from location to location, and at one of the locations they're going to have 10 riddles to answer. Anyone who shows up the event will get a reward, probably one of the tokens of gratification that can be spent at the vendor Key Pass on Verney Island for Legends rewards. And then anyone who gets riddles correctly will get an additional reward. I would assume an extra token, but it could be something else. They didn't say what. The event also has 2 instances of it happening, so if you can't go the first weekend, you can go to a second, so make sure to check out this forum post for times. Next is the Heart of the Historian, where Historian Kui is coming back to tell stories. This is somewhat of a roleplay event and typically morphs into a PvE event as NPCs are spawned in that take place within the stories themselves that players can do combat with. Typically, people who attend get another token of gratification. Cuteness is a Crime is the next event, which is a PvE/trader event that's competitive between the Imperial and Rebel factions. It's multifaceted, so I recommend reading the thread for more information, but I'm going to try and give you the highlights. The first way players can participate is they can donate resources to one of 2 bins, one bin for Imperial, one bin for Rebel. They want to donate as many resources as they can because throughout the event, players will need to defend the donated resources from getting stolen by either the other faction or neutral parties. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to go on. The top individual contributors will get a prize at the end of the event, and then the faction with the greatest donations, so contributions of resources, will get a prize too. So a rebel can get the prize if the rebel faction wins. Same for the Imperial. So make sure to get that out there and compete as best as you can. Again, check out the thread for more information. It seems like some details are still pending on this one. Operation Love Troopers is the next event. There's not any information on this other than troopers are getting Ewok Manseed, and you'll have to find them and then maybe cure them or not. This sounds like the Lost Elders event or the Lost Pumpkin events from Life Day and Galactic Moon Festival, so I think it's going to be a scavenger hunt thing. More details to come, I hope. The next event is the Legendary Love Story, which is a written event. So you can go to the forums and submit your story about your significant other. Maybe you met them on SWG, maybe not, or maybe you could talk about other relationships. And then I guess if you have the best story, you get selected for a personal prize package. So I recommend going and reading more information about that. For all the fishing lovers out there, the Hooked on You fishing event is coming back. This is, again, going to be rewarding players who catch the largest or smallest catches within the event's time frame. Go check that out for more information on where to participate and when. Lastly is the closing event to the Ewok Festival of Love, which is called Everyone's Invited, where everyone will meet on Cloud City for a good social gathering, kind of like how the Life Day event was closed out recently. Now that we covered the Ewok Festival of Love specifically, let's go into the broader development updates for February 2025. At the top, it's a reminder that Ewok Festival of Love is starting, where you can get collections, titles, and badges for 2025, and all of the good stuff that people like about it is back. The next biggest part of this update, though, is the Jabba's Palace catacombs were added. So basically, that garage door that was added to Jabba's Palace a while ago, which is visible from the Wayfar side. So if you're standing at Wayfar looking towards Jabba's Palace, there's a big door there. That opens up now, and the garage is fully decorated and themed with a catacomb section in the back. It is super great looking. I recommend go checking out if you haven't already. This area hosts a new quest called the Order of the Bomar Monks, which is a quest series that can take about maybe 90 minutes to 2 hours if you're going real leisurely about it. There's a side quest in there as well to get a new familiar, and there's a new quest in Jabba's Palace proper involving Sai Snoodle's biggest friend, which can be found out front. There's a new collection as well for the Bomar Monks statuettes, which will get you a decoration item. And of course, completing the Order of the Bomar Monks will give you a badge and a unique title. Video walkthrough this is also going to be appearing on this channel shortly, so make sure to stay subscribed and look out for that. A lot of bug fixes have occurred this update. Probably one of the most remorseful ones is that the roller that was awarded last year, it had its second seat removed, so you can no longer ride tandem wheel bike on it anymore. Pour one out for my wheel homies. The biggest fix in here that I do want to point out is that the back to spray / medic heal priorities have been reworked. So for those who don't know, there was an update some time ago that was to make it so that if somebody in your group has full health, so they wouldn't receive the heal of the back to spray, it would then move down the group list to pick somebody else, since back to spray has a limited number of targets. And they wanted a priority system so it was more informed and predictable when it came to most notably large scale PvP. However, that never particularly worked as intended, it seemed like, and they now have a correct priority in which it first targets your immediate group members, anyone who shares a guild with you. So say you have a large guild and you have 2 groups going on, you use back to spray, but everyone in your immediate group's okay, it will first prioritize that second group of guild members or any other guild members around that are not grouped. Then friendly non-group members, this refers to people who aren't enemies. So like if you're in a big PvP fight and you're rebel, it's going to then target those friendly rebels. And then finally, player pets. So pets can no longer snipe back to sprays, which was one of the largest problems, especially in large PvP where a lot of pets can show up. Because let's be frank, you can heal a pet much greater if it's dead anyways with the revive bonus. That's a little cruel, but that's how it is. You want your back to spray going to other players, not pets mainly. But I recommend checking this out as there's a lot of other small nice fixes in here. Let's move on to the meat of this update though, which is the Senate resolutions. One thing I want to specify before going into this section is that these resolutions were designed by elected community representatives and voted on by the community for implementation. The SWG Legends devs implemented them as outlined by the past Senate resolution. Any commentary I make regarding the design of these resolutions is in discussion with the community and not a critique of the Legends developers' implementation. I appreciate the Legends staff commitment to implementing past Senate resolutions as closely to the state design as they're able to. I gave that disclaimer because I'm going to be giving some more opinionated feedback regarding a few of these updates, specifically in regards to the professions. Let's just start going down this list though. There's a lot of important things to talk about. The first one I want to talk about is the Commando and VIP bunkers having their footprints reduced to 3x3. This is awesome, especially as a mayor who does city planning. These are pretty neat structures I like to include, but their footprints were just prohibitively large for no reason. Unlike the Mustafarian bunker, they don't have vast underground areas that would justify it, so getting more structures shrunk down is much appreciated. The Chronicler vendor has new decoration rewards in the forms of holograms for Kashyyyk, Hoth, and Mustafar, so now you too can collect all the planets in holographic form. There have been some changes to some biolinking restrictions with items. This is in tandem with a item trade change that we'll go over later, and we'll cover all that at once. We'll also cover the space one later. The next one I do want to talk about is the Tauntaun rucksack has had its baseline stats increased. Previously, it had a total of 150 points that you can gain from attributes on the pack. It's been increased by 30 up to 180 points. This brings it in line with the other best-in-slot backpacks with a unique attribute array, which I have up here on the screen if you want to compare them. Moving on, the reverse engineering knife and belt for engineer munition traders have been added to Bespin. For those who don't know, for a while there have been reverse engineering shirts, which basically they're the same as simple shirts, with the exception is that they come in boxes of 250 when you manufacture them instead of 25. The knife and the belt here are the same thing. They'll come in boxes of 250 instead of 25 for better storage. Really nice addition. And then the Storyteller expansion has started with phase 1, and they added 75 new NPCs and props to the Storyteller vendor. I know a few devs are working on this, but also shouts to Ryan, who's been breaking his fingers doing all of these. So thanks, staff. These profession ones we're going to cover later, so let's skip over that. We'll talk about these walls in a second. The last thing that I want to talk about in this section is the ready check features. So they added a ready check feature to the game that you can implement and control using the in-game chat and the windows that pop up. I really appreciate this feature. It's very cool. It brings it in line with other MMOs and games. The one thing that I want to say is that it's going to take some time for people to get used to this feature. I tried it for the first time last night with a group when we were running Heroics, when people were checking if they were ready before starting the last fight of Exar. And it was nice. It worked just as intended. It just took people by surprise. They're like, oh, whoa. Because like some people just don't read the patch notes, or they read this and then they forgot it and haven't seen it yet. So I think it's a really good feature. It's just going to take a little bit of time to catch on. Going back a step for a moment, I forgot to mention that there was a new combination to add to the Chugandar Cube, which creates an item called the Lava Vehicle Resistance Kit. It does what it says in the box. It is supposed to take a vehicle that typically doesn't have lava resistance and give it lava resistance. So if you really want to ride a swoop bike across Mustafar, you can now do that without having to worry about the lava. As a personal point of feedback, I know this was part of the Senate resolution to make this a Chugandar Cube combination, but my plea to staff is please no more Chugandar Cube combinations unless there's hints or you just tell us what it is. Finding these are miserable. You can only test like 6 combinations a minute since there's a 10-second cooldown every time you use it. There's literally thousands that it could still be. And that's with hints. Without hints, you're just going to be ramming these through forever. And I'm going to be real with you all. The last time that these came out for the weapon schematics, I helped. I never found anything, but I helped do some combos and donate stuff to the player who did find all of the combinations himself. And now he's on staff. So our lifeline is gone. I don't know when this is going to get discovered. I'm not doing it. Good luck, everybody. All right, I promised I'd talk about walls. So some of you decorators really love those wall panels that were added with Bespin. And guess what? They added more, and now they have changeable sizes. The old schematics will not be updated. They're still in the game, so if you have them, you can still craft them, use them, trade them, or whatever. But you can no longer purchase those versions of them. The new ones are purchased immediately, and the schematics have also been updated so their Tabana and resource usage are proportional to the size of the wall. So you have now 1x1s, 2x1s, 2x2s, etc. Really nice change for decorators. It lets them maybe prevent using too much extra wall or having walls overlap and maybe having to struggle with Z fighting. So this is nice. Or just like, maybe you just want to model out a smaller area. So having like the 1x1 and 2x1 options is really great. Let's talk about professions last, because I think I have the most to say about that. So let's just skip down to space. So the Bespin Space Skybox has been adjusted so it's not as glowy. There was a mod for this, and basically they incorporated the mod. I appreciate it. As stock value, it was a little bright. The big addition we want to note is that there have been 2 parts added. A Certification 7 weapon with high energy shot and refire rates, and a Certification 8 capacitor with great capacitor energy. Both of these parts can be looted from the Bespin Distress Beacon crates. If you don't know about that information, check out the pilot's channel. I believe there's information as well in there and on the SWG Legends wiki. Similarly, the Incom BGN Cert 4 cap can also be gotten from Bespin crates as well. And then finally, the one that I really want to talk about, which is really good, is that the spacecraft container introduced with the Deep Space update now can not only store up to 2 million credits of value instead of 1 million, but you could also put in the space collection loot items that you get fill up in your inventory, so the flaw, damage, seize, faulty, etc. stuff. That's super awesome, because I've noticed that even if I was to use a Bespin, or if I was to use a scrap value container, I still just have an inventory full of collection items just because there's so many of them. So this is a huge value add and makes that token expenditure look a lot more worth it for these items. So that's great. Next is the quality of life section, which is vocalization lines for the CZ line protocol droids. Honestly, I didn't know there weren't any. I haven't used one of those, but that's cool. And then lastly, the starport screens in the starports have been updated, and I'll put a video up here right now. There they are. They're big and green, and they have text across them. So that's cool. A little bit more immersive. Makes it feel more like a airliner, an airport, starport, if you will. Next, let's talk about the item trade updates. So a bunch of items were updated to have their no trade or no trade shared statuses removed. Here is the full list. The ones that make me the happiest are the factional armors that you get from the theme parks, as I would just always store those and not know what to do with them. These Mustafar buffs are also pretty interesting to me because I run Mustafar every once in a while, so now I'm getting those tradable might be useful. Gorax here is cool. I don't get a lot of Gorax group opportunities, so maybe getting to trade for that instead would be nice for some min-maxy stuff. And some of these unique Legends rewards, like the Nuna Ball advertisement and Mandalorian Straw Box, that's an interesting exchange. Those ones give you like random collection items or they're like XP increases or additions. So those are fun to see. All right, I know you've all been waiting for the spice, so here it comes. Let's start with the smaller because this was the shortest one. So for those who didn't know, shoot first wasn't an ability that you could use on any object, most notably the antennas in Restus. So you couldn't shoot those in like specific layer function objects with that ability. You now can. Nice consistency update. Most notably, though, dire roots and snares will now affect all non-gold mobs. So that means anything that's not a champion or boss, so where they have those gold bars, can now be snared and rooted with dyers. That gives a little bit more utility to the smugglers set when it comes to PvE if they are using dire snares. I don't think any smugglers would really continue to use rogue for PvE if they have a second set like the scoundrel set. But if they have nerf herder, they can now nerf herd, silvers. That could be useful in some PvE situations when questing alone. Not too much in group, but we'll talk about that more later. Let's scroll up to Jedi, who got a lot of buffs. Jedi got a lot of love with this patch. First of all, the Forsake Fear ability has cooldown adjusted. It's now down to 45 seconds, which is a pretty massive drop from 2 minutes. And now it's supposed to regenerate 12% action over 5 seconds rather than 6% action over 10. So now you're regenerating twice as much. And remember, Forsake Fear is a buff that affects the whole group. It's not just you. So if you're in a group with 7 other players, everybody's getting 12% action over 5 seconds. The intention of this change was to, 1, make that ability not look like one terrible point spent, and 2, to give Jedis more utility in groups, to my understanding. The problem with this change is that the inspiration procs from the General's Aspect set for Officer are so powerful. No matter what you do action-wise, it just doesn't matter. Like, officers do too much, especially like when it comes to knowing that charge is also the charge ability from officers, their slower run. That one also has like an ACR cut on top of it, making abilities even cheaper. Officers is too much in forms of like group action management. So whatever you give Jedi or anybody else in this wake is still overshadowed by like officer. There might be a niche situation where like your officer's running dry and procs and this helps them out, or maybe the officer is down in a fight and this maybe helps cover for them until they get revived. However, in PvP, there's typically 2 officers in a group, so you already have a backup officer, and the Jedi is not getting invited to the group because their main role, saber intercepting a target, they don't need to be grouped for. So there's really no reason to stick a Jedi in a group if you could put anyone in there, especially a second officer. The next ability that got updated is Cloud Mines. Not Mind Trick, Cloud Mines, so the expertise ability. So the way Cloud Mines works now is that the action drained from the targets when you use Cloud Mines is restored to party members, so it's another like action buff. It had a few of its boxes updated. It still has the same radius. That box in the line is unchanged, but the other 2 boxes had their point values reduced, so you get more for fewer expertise points, and the action damage has been improved, like relative to that point expenditure. Again, this is a good change as it does give them more group utility, but for PvE, you're not taking this ability. You're just not. If a Jedi needs to get out of combat in PvE, they got the combat cloak option, which is on the way to getting to the bottom of the first tree, not out of the way in the middle tree, or not out of the way in the middle of the second tree. And then the other issue here is, again, you're not sticking the Jedi in a group with anybody. The officers is too good. The one concern PLAers have brought up in the Legends Discord is that unlike other action draining abilities, Cloud Mines doesn't have any recourse. So what recourse is, for those who don't know, is that if you, say, attack a player with Intimidating Strike from Bounty Hunter and drain their action, they'll get a buff on them that prevents you from doing it again. So if you're fighting with like 3 Bounty Hunters on one side against, say, you're hunting a Jedi, and one of you hits them with Intimidating Strikes, the other 2 can't piggyback off that and like drain, 6,000 action at a time or whatever the value is. Cloud Mines doesn't have that. So theoretically, you could get a group of Jedi that roll up and drain all 12,000 action out of a fully buffed level 90. Theoretically. There's a few problems with this. One, it's only useful in PvP. So who cares in the PvE realm of this, right? Second of all, have you ever seen a group of coordinated Jedi? I've seen maybe 3 at most in PvP, and that's just, I could tell because they were intercepting at times off of each other, but that's about as tight as it got. 3, if a group were memeing with this, I think the enemies would wise up pretty quickly, and then they'd have very easy counters to this, such as rooting the Jedi, snaring one of the Jedi, holding them out. Of course, there's ways that Jedi could play around this, but again, I think it would just be a short-term meme before everyone had their fun with it. It is funny to roll up and like delete someone's action bar, but It's not super effective because again, you'd have to do that to like 2 officers in the enemy group for it to even matter. Because again, one officer is so prohibitively powerful for action regeneration. I don't really think this matters too much. I'm not too worried about not having recourse. I haven't heard anybody memeing on this, but we'll see. Moving on. Speaking of Saber Intercept, though, its cooldown was reduced from 60 to 30. Good. Let Jedis do more of what the one thing they're really good at in PvP, which is intercepting off the bounty hunter dropping traps, intercepting off the officer, throw it up SFP, or intercepting off the medic who forgot stasis is on their bar, or maybe it's a bad time to stasis. One of the two. You know, you got options here. It's good. Next is Enrage, which for those who don't know what Enrage is, it's a taunt if you're more familiar with MMOs in general. So when a Jedi uses Enrage, it forces the target to attack them. It no longer requires a specific stance, so that means Dark Side Jedi. It's free real estate, gamers. This is a valid method of play, Dark Side Jedi tank. I kind of hinted at that in my Beastmaster builds video. And again, you don't even have to be a Beastmaster to make a good Dark Side Jedi tank. So that helps vary tank builds a little bit. The biggest update, though, is that the Guardians heroic set got a buff. So now when you're wearing the 5-piece Guardian set, you can use Sweep 8. So typically Sweep 7 is the highest rank, but now there's Sweep 8 when you have the jewelry set on, and it does the same damage as Sweep 7. However, it generates threat and aggro when it hits all enemies, like additional. So the idea here is that previously Jedis had a hard time tanking a group of enemies because they only had Enrage and Strike, Guardian Strike, with the Guardian set. So they would like Enrage on one target, spam Guardian Strike on the other, and then any more than 2, it's just, man, hope no one's hitting them, which of course, you know, they usually jump over to the commando or the officer, or maybe a spy is hitting them or something. Now, though, if the enemies are grouped up, they can sweep, and so they have a little bit easier of a time controlling groups. I don't know how well this is working. If you've been trying this out, let me know in the comments. The other thing that Sweep 8 does to help this, though, is that it also reduces the enemy hate aggro on all group members. So it kind of works like an aggro reset, similar to Smuggler's Gambler 5-piece ability, or Medic's evasion skill in their first tree, where it's supposed to reduce or eliminate their hate. So the idea is that also once that Jedi sweeps, say that, you know, your commando is popping off and threw out their cluster bombs and they got a lot of hate, sweep resets their hate and lets you also bring all that hate onto yourself. There is an issue with this mechanic, I think, in the broader picture, but we'll go over that in the bounty hunter section, which I think is the spiciest section. So like smugglers, their dire roots and snares now affect all non-gold mobs. But let's talk about where this is actually useful in the end game. Let's start with the first 5 heroics. Tusken Army, anything that's not a gold mob has a gun, except for the Banthas and the Massives, which are the fewest enemies in the whole instance. You have the Lost Star Destroyer. Anyone who's stuck on melee has a gun, and if they don't, then they're a boss mob like the Black Sun Borders, who only have a polearm. In Exar, everything's a boss mob except for Gacklebats and the monkeys, so I guess there's a W for you bounty hunters. You can now root the Gacklebats and the monkeys, which actually might be more of a problem because you might root them outside of AoEs, and then clearing that section would go slower. Not that it takes a long time, it only takes about 2 minutes in a slow run. But moving on, you have Akva Min, they're all bosses. And finally, you have IG-88, they all have guns. Except for, I guess, the battle droids that explode in the beginning, but honestly, you just want them to hurry up and explode anyways. So again, I don't think rooting them or snaring them is useful. Battle of Echo Base, everything has a gun or is a boss, except for the Wampas in the Wampa area leading up to Njako. That's basically the only useful thing you can root and snare before anyone says, what about the Tauntauns? They all can spit at you. So it's literally just those Wampas. Moving on to the Legends content here. So you have Avatar Hard Mode. Again, they all have guns or they're bosses, but in this case, they're all bosses. So they're all golds. Kizash, all bosses. Sinya, all bosses. The only W here is the Dark Jedi Temple itself. That's because it's mostly filled with like those Dark Jedi acolytes that are all silvers. So That's actually useful. So this is a W. So if like a bounty hunter like lays down a net and a group pulls a bunch of those dudes at once and run them through, they can net them all, and then they can easily AoE them all, and no one's taking damage. Of course, you can't net the Minox or the Ritualists, and of course, Minox and those dangerous things in there for some reason. So you still have to contend with those, but those are pretty few in number compared to all of the silvers in there. So that's a W. So what is this all to say? Bounty Hunter has a great kit. There's just no content where that kit comes into play. There needs to be more non-boss enemies that are very dangerous or need to be controlled or corralled in some way, or mechanics around that for this to really mean anything. So for now, this doesn't really mean anything, but maybe for future content it will. Going ahead and moving on though, Tangle Bomb now generates hate aggro, which is their main root thing. Web Bomb, I think, is the spy AoE. I honestly forgot what Web Bomb was, but that's in there too. Razornet has a new particle effect to improve visibility from community feedback. I put that on screen right now, compared with Tangle Bomb. Ooh, pretty. Moving on, we have Fumble. It got a change. So Fumble now generates hate and aggro on an enemy, which I think it already did. Maybe not. I guess not. I know bounty hunters have that agonizing hate or scream or whatever that does a hate gen. I thought Fumble did a little bit. Either way, it does it now for sure. And then Fumble will also provide a 20-second buff for the player and anyone in the group that increases their glancing blow chance by 6%. So let me reword this. When Fumble is used, it places the debuff on the target that it normally does, and it gives them that 40% chance to glance anything they attack. And it now applies a buff to everybody in the group, including the bounty hunter, where any attack incoming to them has an increased chance to glance by 6%. So Fumble now does a few things. So this is a flat buff. I saw some confusion with players thinking that Fumble had its debuff property removed, and now it's just a group buff. That's not the case. It now works as a hate generator, as well as a group buff and a single target debuff. It's a good change. 6% glancing blow is not a trivial amount in endgame where players can stack their defensive values really high. And there's other buffs that can be combined with this to compound it, like wind buff it from a pet or spot a sucker from a smuggler. So I think this is pretty good overall, and 20 seconds is a pretty long time for that kind of buff. Yeah, this is good. Yeah, thumbs up. Lastly, Intimidating Strike now heavily reduces enemy hate and aggro on all group members, allowing it to work as a hate/aggro reset. So the problem with this ability is that it works like Sweep 8 does, in that it reduces hate and aggro on everybody that's not you. So this ability is only useful if you're the designated tank. And in Star Wars Galaxies, there is no reason to opt for a bounty hunter tank over a Jedi. There's no really reason to opt for a commando tank over a Jedi. Why? Jedis just have higher survivability because they can parry melee and ranged attacks, and they can push that parry value up to like 96% or whatever the hard cap is. So they can basically become immortal to anything that's not like an AoE or a punishing blow or something. Like, it's pretty absurd. Jedi are just too good at their job. Similarly, like, officers are just too good at generating action. Jedis are too good at just not dying. So Jedis are just always the tank. The only person I know who probably got excited about this is Lucas, but he's literally one of 2 bounty hunter tanks I've ever met. And that's just how it is. Star Wars Galaxies isn't a game where off tanks are a thing even. So having 2 tanks in a group isn't incentivized at all. And even if there were, this mechanic would break that design entirely, because now you're wiping the aggro off of each other with this. So like if you had a bounty hunter tank and a Jedi tank, Jedi sweeps, resets your threat. You use intimidating strikes, resets the Jedi's threat. You know what I mean? It would just, you'd just be playing tug of war over boss fights. It just wouldn't work. And then again, there's no fight that really incentivizes having 2 tanks. You can have like a spy basically just do whatever you need to do if you do need somebody that's tank adjacent. In fact, that's even a strategy some people employ for Kazash and Sinya. They just use a spy to tank instead of a Jedi because it does more damage. It has a hate gainer with Assassin's Mark. Does the same job. Just got to make sure that, they don't lose attention, or else the boss is gonna run Unchained and do a meme on everybody. But that's a different conversation. So again, like the hate gainers, cool. The reducing hate, it kind of fights against ever having an off tank. So for future instances or encounter designs, I would hope that they're not trying to do like a 2-tank setup. It just doesn't work with any of the content already in the game, and this kind of design fights against it entirely. Personally, I don't think the 2-tank design is necessary for this game. It's fine. Most people just don't even bring a tank to most of the content, but that's just something to keep in mind, especially when you're applying it to an AoE like Sweep 8, where you can't target it. At least Intimidating Strike, it sounds like it will reduce threat on all group members for that specific target. I guess what could work is if the bounty hunters, say, tanking Kizash for some reason, and then ads come in, the Jedi could sweep, pick up the ads, and then the bounty hunter could use Intimidating Strike on Kizash to keep attention just for the boss and not the ads. So there's that. Again, the problem here is that Bounty Hunter's larger kit just doesn't fit in anywhere in the mechanics, and making them a better tank, it's the same problem as making Jedi better at generating action for the group. There's already somebody else who does that so much better, there's no way you can catch up. You could say, let's give Bounty Hunters the ability to parry ranged attacks, but then you'd have to give them lightsabers, which I'm sure some players would be fine with, some players wouldn't. That's all I'm saying, is that Jedi just have a leg up on everybody else because of that one mechanic when it comes to tanking. Just like officers have a leg up on everybody for action regeneration because of the General's aspect set. Fighting against those designs just doesn't really do anything. You got to lean into them and then have bounty hunters lean into other things. Like, I like that the snares and stuff works. There's just no content that it matters for. There's no group content that it matters for. I could only ever see this being useful in like solo play, challenge runs or something, where you're like, I'm going to go do Kubaza without cheesing it. Like really kind of whatever stuff. Because like this doesn't even work in Quarantine Zone. All the zombies have guns. So again, I just don't know what this accomplishes for now. But in the future, might matter. And I also don't mind like the nets generating aggro and having Bounty Hunter lean into the tank aspect, because clearly SOE, based on the kit they gave Bounty Hunters, wanted them to be a tank, return fire, really good defensive cooldowns with take cover and shields, prescience. Like, Bounty Hunters are great at survivability, but again, Jedi's just do it better, and better to an extent where they just can't catch up. All right, so there's already been one hotfix deployed. I'm expecting maybe one other based on these patch notes. But starting with the Ewok Festival of Love portion, they handed out the Storyteller decoration injectors on Monday when this hotfix went out, since that didn't happen on Friday. And these injectors just extend the life of Storyteller placed tokens until the end of the Ewok Festival of Love, so people can decorate cities and whatever. Badge icons were updated, because I guess they had the old icons on them. And then Benjamin's face is no longer melting. Here's his melty face. I hope you enjoyed that. It's gone now. As for bug fixes, Sweep 8 will only aggro from 6 meters. On release, that Sweep 8 update that I talked about, it had an aggro range of 160 meters. Oopsies. It's fixed now. Similarly, that back to medic heal prioritization thing that I talked about earlier was misapplied to heal over times. So basically what this means, that if the group was full health and you did the, was it back to splash, where it applies a heal over time to everybody in your group, if they were full health, they wouldn't get it, and the ability will go on cooldown, and you would have spent action. That works fine now. I just healed a heroic run last night. Worked just as it used to. Perfect. And then here's that information about the backpacks not biolinking on purchase, since they were made tradable, but they still biolinked instantly, so that was a minor oversight, but that's been fixed now. They did take out the Hut costume because I guess there's problems with it from the Storyteller vendor. Oh well. Similarly, the twin cloud cars had an ITV issue that AT-AT heads had a little bit, where if you loaded them in after a specific patch, their travel destinations were erased. Oopsies. If you didn't load them in, they're fine. If you did, you're going to have to reset those. I'm assuming the people who've been affected by that already did that, though. And then there's some oopsies regarding the tier 7 weapons that were added. But if this adversely affected you, you can contact CSR and basically get your space boo-boos fixed. The Forsake Fear, by the way, was reverted back to its normal amount instead of the new amount, because they weren't sure why the buff isn't working. However, I spoke with one of the devs, and they informed me that the issue was identified, and that will be fixed. I don't know when that's going to be patched. Maybe they snuck it in when I wasn't looking and they just didn't update the notes. But long story short, Forsake Fear, even on live, just never worked. Thanks, SOE. Always the best. Well, that's all the updates and latest news regarding SWG Legends and the current content going on. Make sure you're subscribed so you can see those walkthroughs for the new Jabba's Palace quests, as well as Ewok Festival of Love stuff if you need a refresher on that. And let me know what you thought of the update yourself. I'm sure there's a lot of strong opinions on the profession updates, similar to mine, or completely opposite of mine. As always, though, stay hungry.